never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Good evening, welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now, we're with you to the end, because the end is a very long ways away, thanks to us. And compliments of that channel here at Bay and Dundas in downtown Toronto. We're making it, we're breaking it, we're shaking it, and we make the evil run very, very fast. Today is supposed to be March 8th. This was supposed to be the big day. The computer network's all shut down. A lot of things have been going on behind the scenes, it appears. At least we hope so, because the show can be live streaming and get on the internet later. But it was a big arrest with these anonymous guys in the last few days, and other bizarre things happening in the internet world, where the cables to a good part of Africa were ripped up by a ship's anchor, and I guess that's really cut down in the Nigerian fan mail. So the last one I got was a guy pretending to be the head of the FBI sending me some kind of package or something like that. So good thing for spam filters. I'll miss all those guys. But the big story is, of course, the guy, Mr. Sabu, Hector Xavier Monsignor, 28-year-old self-taught unemployed computer programmer with no college education, living in public housing in New York, is the man. And he's also been an FBI informant for a good period of time, and he had a Twitter account with tens of thousands of people on it. He's the guy who is behind many of the things that have happened that are blamed on Anonymous, but he's also been in the hands of the FBI for a good period of time. So what is he? He's an agent provocateur, it appears, or maybe some kind of Larry Curly and Moe, a useful idiot that's been turned into something else because he's no longer of any value. So this major investigation going into LuzSec and all the hacking going on various websites, including government websites, breaking into some of these big companies like Strategic Forecasting, and the one Alex Jones was accused of belonging to, Stratfor, getting at the banks and all this. This is him and his network. Other people charged were Ryan Ackroyd, 25, Doncaster, England; Jake Davis, 19, of Lerwick, Scotland; Darren Martin, 25, Galway, Ireland; Doncha O'Sirbhal, 19, of Birr, Ireland; and Jeremy Hammond, 27, of Chicago. So it looks like they've been taking care of business, it appears. And then turning the tides on the Big Brother network, because Google passed their new privacy legislation, which means you have no privacy. Firefox has come up with a thing that can let you spy back on, who's spying on you, but unfortunately it's probably put together by people who are spying on you anyway. So even if you open this up to spy on the people spying on you, they're spying on everybody, spying on everybody, baby. Just turn on the cameras and blast it out to the universe. So are we turning the tables on Big Brother? Who knows? But the free collusion add-on for Firefox at least gives you the illusion of fighting back at them. And that's not such a bad thing. So some of the other countries that were involved with this cable snapper: Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Juba, which is the capital of South Sudan, and of course Nairobi. 1.8 million cable or internet users, increased to 3.1 million, and I'm sure we've probably been in contact with a good half of them with all the junk mail that comes out of that region of the world. They're trying to sell everything from soup to nuts and nuts to soup, and I've won so many lotteries and got to share in so many trillions and zillions of dollars. It's just unbelievable, but that's life. Vladimir Putin, it appears, has won his election. Congratulations to Vladimir. Maybe congratulations to the world, because it appears he's one of the few world leaders that maybe has the experience, the chutzpah, to stand up to the New World Order in various stages and make a game out of it, where most of the rest would just curry into a hole and die. And no pun intended there, but a lot of people have been currying into holes and dies with the New World Order. But the election, they said there's all kinds of fraud and such, but there are no other elections that don't have fraud. Absolutely none. Like, it's just mind-boggling to even say for a moment. Like, even here in Canada, we have some vicious elections going on with all kinds of accusations of fraud. people using robo-dialers. So the conservative government uses these machines so that they can spy on your phone, I guess, and call you up and tell you, where to go, what to do, and get you into some kind of trouble one way or another. And that's just absolutely deplorable. But that's the way the New World Order works. It's always worked that way. There hasn't probably ever been a fair election in my lifetime. I would doubt that very sincerely. There was a website or a book going way back into the 60s in American elections, and they had, it was called Vote Scam, as memory serves me. So the daughters of the guy who found out about all this stuff wrote a book, put up a website in their father's honor, who had passed away, unfortunately, and revealed to the world what was going on, that the elections were fake, and that they would get results, and that they would publish these results before even the polls had closed. That was your freedom, that was your democracy. It's just a load of crap. And unfortunately, it's one that we have to live with. So we have a picture here that, this is an American picture of late. What's wrong with this picture? So this is what they want us to see here with all these elections. So there was a great book written a long time ago called Lights, Camera, War, and it can also go Lights, Camera, Election, or any other propaganda they want to have. So this is Mitt Romney standing in front of a crowd of about 350 people. This is Rick Santorum standing in front of a crowd of about 300 people. And, the media coverage of all the GOP candidates or all the big front runners that are owned by the major corporations. And then there's 4,000 people go to talk or listen to Ron Paul talk, and that just doesn't get shown. His name is omitted, his picture is omitted. They just don't even put him out there in any way, shape, or form. And then they have the nerve, the gall, to say that, we have free elections and all this sort of rot. Like even in our own country here in Canada, and it's done in the United States, they'd have an all-candidates debate, except they don't invite all the candidates. It's only the big parties, the big corporate controlled parties that get to go to the debate. If you're on the ballot, you go to the debate. End of story. So that happened in the United States too in previous elections, where they had the the oddball parties, or the I really wouldn't call them oddball. I say the corporate parties are the oddball parties, but the parties that are less known because of media concentration. Something like maybe like the Constitutionalist Party, Libertarians, and such like that. They would show up to these debates, and their leaders weren't allowed to debate. So maybe if people heard them talk, they would want them to be president of the United States. I know I would, because probably any one of these candidates is way better than all the other ones put together. They're just like a dog and pony show. But at least in Putin's Russia, we didn't get to hear about, the other candidates running against him too much. One of them was leading the Communist Party, as if we need them back again. Another guy was a billionaire, an American billionaire who owns a sports team. So, as if he's going to save, he owns the New Jersey Nets. Billionaire industrialist by the name of Mikhail D. Prokhorov. Like we need him like a hole in the head. Then a couple of other people that we've never heard of before either. So great competition. Probably the only one you could vote for is Putin. He's the only one to stand up to the new power plays that are coming along the way. And we have to wonder, like, how wild are these power plays? After we did last week's show, we talked a lot about pushing the button, pushing the button. Russia's not going to take it anymore. I've been studying these things for years. I could almost write Putin's speech, and I found it. And it's just exactly what I've been saying and analyzing for many long years. But after the show, our corporate media has come up with almost like a surrender statement, like on the Globe and Mail Friday and Saturday. They're coming up with like Putin's backing down on Assad. He's not going to back him up, and such like that. It looks like there's been a lot of translation troubles when they allegedly went to his Dhaka and heard him speak, but. He was canted on a few issues, but this backing down on Syria just didn't seem to be all that well interpreted, let me say. When you read his own speech, his own words, his own editorials that were in the Russian press, like you'd almost want to start digging a bomb shelter, let me tell you. Like, he's not taking it. He's not taking it in any way, shape, or form. One article here, Putin blasts U.S. And he stands firm on foreign policy over this Israel and Iran scenario. He slams the U.S. for absolute invulnerability. Russia to help rebuild Afghanistan. Now there's a real trick, eh? They got thrown out, compliments of help from the American intelligence agencies and Al-Qaeda, and then America goes in there, gets the crap kicked out of them and have to leave, and now Russia's going to come in and rebuild the place, and China's going to get the oil. Like, there's a real great foreign policy strategy session going on about that one, I'm sure. And then Putin speaks out against outside interference in the Syria conflict. So I got two stories now. I got the one that Vladimir Putin wrote, signed his own name to in the Russian press, and then I got the one that corporate media hearsay happened. So excuse me, he's really gone after the United States for pursuing its own interests to the detriment of world security. And he served notice that Russia would continue to oppose this when he returns to the Kremlin, which he has. They have close and trusting relationships, but he's a little worried about these guys. This missile defense shield that they're setting up in Europe is really bothering him to a great extent, and I don't know why they really need it. It's just we were getting along pretty good, and almost every weapon the Soviets system put together that Russia inherited was probably old and rusty and falling apart. So there really wasn't a whole lot to sweat about, but now he's going to invest a lot of money in having a deterrent. So he's going to put together a massive missile 21st century deterrent. Like we need that, like we need a hole in the head. They're worried about Iran, if and when they could ever build one, and if and when they can put it in a missile, and if and when it'll ever fly. Might even, you know, come back to the ground and crash on top of them. There's been a lot of disastrous missile tests in history. That's something I'm not too worried about. Getting on the wrong side of Russia and China, that I can be worried about, because a lot of their stuff could come raining down on us with no trouble at all. So he looks at this phony protecting human rights, saying that because it's not being done to a recognized standard, that this is going to come back and bite them. He says it's elementary demagoguery. The whole concept of security between the United States and Russia is completely different. Invulnerability for one means absolute vulnerability for all others. It's impossible to agree with this perspective about the way the Americans and the West and NATO are interpreting the world, because they want everybody to lay flat, prostrate on the ground, helpless, while the Department of Homeland Security is stomping on their heads and they're being body scanned, and that's okay, but don't ever look at what we do. We're the good guys. Hardly. So if this military strike goes on, he says very clearly, such a thing, if it happens, would have truly catastrophic consequences on a massive scale. To such an extent that you don't even know where the dust is going to settle when it starts. So he says he looks to new, close, alliance-like model for cooperation in many other sensitive areas that are still on the table. And I read in that the New World Order approach may still be on the table, that they all have to get sucked into it. In some of his own words, he says, as long as the gunpowder of strategic nuclear forces built by the titanic work of our fathers and grandfathers remains dry, no one will dare launch a large-scale aggression against us. We should take into account that technological progress in various areas, from new models of weapons and military hardware to information and communications technology, has fundamentally changed the nature of armed conflict. And I think we can read in that some of the more modern types of weapons, like weather weapons, as well as cyberspace weapons. High-precision, long-range weapons of conventional charges will become the means of achieving a decisive victory in conflicts, including a global conflict. Threat of regional and local wars are breaking out dangerously close to Russia's borders, and they're being purposely provoked. Today we see how new regional and local wars break out one after another. We see zones of instability and artificially maintained, managed chaos emerging. And from the chaos, of course, will come the order. Furthermore, we see how some are purposely provoking such conflicts in the immediate vicinity of Russia's borders and those of our allies. So I think we can read in that he's not too happy. He's going to start increasing the pay for the army, making it a much more professional army. On the flip side, there's also an article about anti-Russian sentiment really starting to spike in the United States. Washington and Moscow at loggerheads over Syria, because Putin wants a UN resolution. some kind of rules, but he also wants it to be done not in a replacement of useful idiots with a new useful idiot either. So it's like something, you can't stand back and watch Assad be a maniac, but at the same time, you're being sucker punched. Just like our own Canadian minister here is trying to bring in this Stasi spy bill C-30, you know, using the lowest common denominator, the pedophiles, saying, well, if you're not with us, then you're with them. So we have to spy on everybody. It's necessary. This is the same thing like the United States does in Syria to say, well, you know, if you don't let us have control of the world, then guys like Assad are going to tear it all up and eat us for breakfast. Doesn't work that well. Of course, McCain finally says something I like. The United States should lead an international effort to protect key population centers in Syria, especially in the north, through airstrikes on Assad's forces. I guess I'm a little bit different in some of that, because everything's got to be like so formal and so dynamic and so in your face. I don't know. It's just a shame, you know, we don't have a rogue submarine that just launches one unnamed, untraceable missile that just comes out of nowhere. Nobody can figure out for any reason, just pops out of the sea and lands in Assad's palace and go, buddy, that one's got your name and address on it. Don't know how, don't know why, don't know who, don't know when, don't know why, don't know nothing really, but I do know one thing. You got a real big mess in the garden, pal. So maybe you better not, you know, shoot up your own towns and villages too much, because them damn pirates could just pop out of anywhere, anytime, and fire off another one if you're alive to hear it after the first one hits. But that's just me, and that's the way you handle bullies like that guy. Whoops! Who launched that missile? Never heard of it. Don't know where it came from. Who said Zambia doesn't have a strategic missile program? Says right on the leftovers of that missile. Then, of course, Mitt Romney's just dying to get into this. Dying to get into this so he can kill the rest of us. Now, of course, he has the nerve to talk about Putin and his elections, saying that there's the flagrant manipulation and media restrictions that marred this election. As if you give Ron Paul a chance to have an even chance, or that they're counting the ballots before everybody's voted. Give me a break. And of course, the Republicans are probably going to just really cheer up and try to bone up to Israel to get the Jewish vote. So they say, you know, vote for us, we'll nuke Iran for you. So then they even have the nerve to talk about protesters, which are probably American CIA-funded agents protesting in Russia, and they were rounded up and, you know, maybe got thumped a little bit. And then, of course, the Russians say, well, we were a lot nicer on them than you were on your Occupy protests, which are probably all paid for from the same people, the same account. No surprise there. We're living proof. We saw it here in Toronto with the G20, what went on. It was no mistake what they were doing to, you know, to just innocent people. We got any nerve to tell Russia to mind their P's and Q's when we were going around there just beating our own into the ground, rounding up people for no reason, taking them to the equivalent of a concentration camp to be starved and tormented. That's our own people. It wasn't even an enemy at war. See, if we were at war, we'd have to treat people well because, you know, there's things like the Hague Accords and, you know, the Geneva Convention and all that kind of stuff. There's rules about handling prisoners. Prisoners who are at war with us who tried to kill us 5 minutes ago, we got to be good to them. But you're just an average Canadian citizen walking down the street, having nothing to do with the G20 protests anyway. And even if you did, it's your moral right to protest if you want to. You're free to do that. Well, they're just going to haul you away, beat the crap out of you, and torture you in this makeshift prison for a while. And then we got the nerve to tell other people, and then we got the nerve to tell them about how they're not running a fair election when our own people are cheating in the elections. There's the pot calling the kettle black, and then there's what we do. And what did they do? Well, maybe we can get into a bit of that. Freak storms wreak havoc on the heartland. We had a whole whack of tornadoes going across the U.S. Midwest. And we got to wonder, whether, you know, weather weapons exist. Was Putin getting back at America for the assassination attempt by launching or evoking some of his own weather weapons to go across? You know, I saw this picture, just floored me. You got a nuclear power plant in the background. Whether it's working or not, I'm not too sure. The William H. Zimmer nuclear power plant. originally it had cracks in every pipe, so they never opened it up as a nuclear power plant, but it was refitted with Bechtel Corporation and a retired United States Naval Admiral to be, nuclear proficient. And that's kind of scary too, since every pipe was cracked, but you get a lot for $1.5 billion after you spend billions of dollars to make it in the first place. So the fact that all this happened in Moscow, Ohio, you just sort of wonder, was Moscow, Russia, leaving you a little calling card to say thanks for coming out, because this is how old the weather weapons are. This article goes back to Ike. Ike's advisor reports man's progress in weather control by Captain H.T. Orville. Weather made to order. That was the beauty of that Collier's magazine so many years ago. They could really lay it on the line and tell you what was going on. There were so many articles in Collier's that I've come across that just absolutely blow me away. And then we have to wonder, who's getting blown away in the States. Hopefully I get my little map up here soon enough so we can look at the paths of these storms, because they did fly the same paths they did a year previously. So this little map here is, the main two things, but this upper northern front through Henryville, this place was just flattened right out. They were talking that the winds were stronger than a Class 5 hurricane. They were going like 250 kilometers an hour or miles an hour. I've forgotten now. They were going really damn fast. And how anybody could survive going through that stuff, you wonder. And then, of course, we have to wonder, because in Huntsville, which is very close to there, well, not that close to there, but in this little spot down here in Mississippi, there is supposed to be a space flight research hub for NASA. And this little community was wiped out. So we have to wonder, okay, that's twice, 2 years in a row. Last year was in April, as I recall, that this little place and the people around it, full of rocket scientists at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, are just whacked around in a storm path. Is there a reason for this? Like, what are the odds you're going to get this twice? Unless it's being done for, some sort of reason that we can't understand, like weather weapons. Because if we're doing it in Ike's generation, this stuff is so old. That's before my time. They're working on weather weapons. That's the way they're going to fight the new wars. They don't need the nuclear weapons anymore. That's passé. A Russian general, chief of staff of the Russian army, Nikolai Makarov, has said that he's telling us, or his people, that this war, this attack between Washington and Tel Aviv going into Iran will happen in April and no later than June of this year. They will use the pretensions of Iran building a nuclear weapon. Even though Iran's been on the whipping boy end of things like cyber attacks, assassination of scientists, a spying program of these drones coming across, the economic warfare 101, 201, and 301 to try to knock them down, somehow they're the bad guy, but we're doing all this to them. Nobody seems to really cry too much for Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu came to Washington, he came to Ottawa to meet our Prime Minister too, and he's laying his cards on the table about when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. Seemingly doesn't have the greatest relationship with President Obama. They don't get along. They say it's a really bad relationship, actually. Netanyahu, as opposed to being, a love-in commie at university like the president with fake ID, was MIT educated and probably did graduate and probably does have forms with his name on it that say he went to that school, and there's probably people there that remember him that weren't with the Weather Underground. He was wounded storming a hijacked airliner, and Obama was wounded in a panty raid. He fought in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and Obama fought over the magic reefer at a frat house. So we can see there's a little bit of a difference between the two men. So what it comes down to is Netanyahu wants to go ASAP, as in yesterday, damn the consequences, full speed ahead. And Obama realizes this, he doesn't want to be a wartime president looking for re-election. It's going to be a hard nut to swallow, especially after all the fallout and collateral damage comes back at you, hitting the economy, knocking the price of fuel through the roof. So Obama offered him something a little better. Wait till the election's over, and then I'll help you. So what we'll do is we'll give you some bunker buster bombs, and you buy a little time, and then we'll both saddle up and take them out together. I'll do it from my bunker, and Netanyahu can do it like a fighting man popping out of the air in a parachute with his Uzi ablazing. The downside is, when they do that, and there seems to be no doubt about it, in this article it says U.S. intelligence officials believe Israeli leaders have already decided to attack Iran, barring a significant change in Iran's nuclear posture. So it seems to be a done deal, done deal, done deal. The downside is, whether they have a bomb yet or not, it's pretty much immaterial, but eventually, in the static of time, the future, which goes on to infinity forever, as soon as they get one, which means it's inevitable, even if it's not in our lifetime, that when they do acquire one, the law of unintended consequences means they're going to blow you up. There's no other way to think about it. What would you do? So say some, 8-year-old kid survives after watching everything he's known turn to, whatever, glazed human flesh on the ground or something like that. And then he grows up and becomes the head of Iran, another militaristic nation down the road, and has some new monster weapon of some sort. I think for a minute he's going to hesitate in using it. There's only one way to protect Israel, and it's not by bombing everybody into the ground. It's by engagement, rapprochement. If they, we got to find out what they really want. I would do it differently. I'd say, I'll build your reactors gratis, but they're going to run on that element we were talking about last week, thorium. It's radioactive, it makes energy, it's cheap, it's plentiful, it's efficient, just you can't make a bomb out of it. So just pony up and say we're friends, I'll build you those reactors for free. And then Iran's got to shit or get off the pot. If they turn you down, and they just want to stay with the uranium, that means they don't want electricity, and they don't want peace. It means they want a bomb and they want war. So at least then you know for sure. There's no doubt that they want to make a weapon to kill you with. Because any sane person would take the other option and say, hey, I save a ton of dough and I get my energy, and maybe we just turn the whole world around a little bit to make reactors out of something that doesn't make plutonium to make bombs with. And that we reduce the availability of enriched uranium significantly around the world. But I think perhaps maybe our people are so smart, our leaders are so brilliant, they don't even know what the periodic table of elements are. So, you know how hard it is to remember all those Swiss bank account numbers? Like, it's amazing. Especially when you got to change them all the time because people are closing in on you and stuff like that. Like we talked about years ago with the accounts for Julie Fantino and whether or not they existed or not. And, they busted some guy who used to be with the Toronto Police Intelligence Unit because he was a private detective and he found out all our politicians' secret bank account numbers all over the world. So they charged him on some trumped up charges and he had to flee and go to the Bahamas. They'll probably just forget about him down there. Well, he had all those account numbers. Then they changed them in a nanosecond because they were also in cahoots with some executives at various major banks. Surprise, surprise. You know how hard it is to remember? Well, okay, I had these numbers, but since we got caught by that guy, now I got these new numbers, and then we moved it to this country and then to that country. I got trouble finding my keys sometimes. Never mind, you have 20 different bank account numbers in 30 different countries. But then, I guess that's why I'm not in politics. So the other thing, too, is it's a religious holiday. Purim is a Jewish holiday commemorating the killing of 75,000 Persians. So Xerxes ordered the mass execution of those who opposed Jewish rule. And there was a little backfire there. We had a slaughter of the innocents on the 13th of Adar, celebration of death. And then I like this little thing too, because they talk about Esther and Mordecai. They were the two big players in this affair. Their names are really taken after the pagan gods Astarte and Marduk. Ooh, that hurts. But I guess that's why God was right. We're all sinners. So as we all pretend to be some pious religion of one pious religion or another religion, when you all beat down to the bottom path there's always a little black flag somewhere hanging around that is just not too good at all. That's why it's not really the high road to say, well, let's nuke them all and go to paradise or something, because that's what we say they do. So they just want to kill all the infidels and have all the virgins in paradise. So what are we going to do to stop it? Well, we'll kill them all and go to paradise. Well, if everybody's killing everybody and going to paradise, who are the good guys? There are no good guys. So China says they're ready for war. Even they're in that too. Chinese leader Hu Jintao said the PLA's Navy was prepared and ready to go to war. That was in December of last year. So there could be a translation difficulty there too. It says, you know, you could interpret his words as meaning armed struggle or military conflict. Not a whole lot to flip a coin on that one. So they look as well at this whole thing with Iran and what the possibilities that may come out of this, and the total misrepresentation of Western media as being major causes for this. That's why it is so important to change the channel, to turn off those bullshit factories. Because if they get their way and the lies go to the nth degree, we could be eating radioactive waste. Because we didn't have the foresight, the courage, and the initiative to just turn off the idiot box and change that channel. That's where you can come here and change to that channel, which is this channel, and have a different perspective on the world. I don't represent any corporations. I'm not COINTELPRO. I'm just universally hated and despised by people who gravitate to the New World Order and power and corruption. They hate my guts. Because I'll turn on the lights on the little rats so you can see who they are. There was also another budding conflict, because a lot of this is about oil, where the Chinese are bumping up against the Filipinos on the Reed Bank in the South China Sea. This is supposed to be 80 miles off the Philippine shore, inside their 200-mile nautical mile exclusion economic zone. And the Chinese are coming in there with patrol boats and pushing them around and kicking them around. It was quite a military incident in March of 2011. They also did the same thing with the Vietnamese. Because this conflict for the oil, for the natural resources, is almost like, you know, you're fighting over the last little bit of food. Sometimes people get really nasty about stuff like that, especially when they're starving for it. And this is where this type of battle is just going to be horrendous, because even if the major players don't fight exactly, they do fight by proxy. So, you know, the Russians and the Chinese have no problem giving the most advanced missiles, or some pretty close to the most advanced missiles in their inventory, like one they talk about is the Sunburn missile, to the Iranians to shoot the U.S. Navy up with, because every one that they blow up is one less that they have to blow up if they ever have to take the turn. So it's a whole lot easier to get, you know, it's an old commercial and a little bit of comedy with little boys. You know, get Mikey to do it. Yeah, get Iran to do it. And then we don't have to fight our own battles. We'll get somebody else to fight our own battles, and we'll just sit back and watch and profit from it. Not a good move. So what have the Americans done with Iran? They've created a virtual embassy. Screw that. It's time you guys, like, I don't want you to go scrapping it out. I don't want you nuking this. I don't want you nuking that. Sit down and talk about it like, you know, adults. Whether you got a birth certificate or not. Maybe Ahmadinejad doesn't have a birth certificate either, and the two of you can sit down and just talk about, we got elected without birth certificates. Maybe you got something in common. Talk it out. It's a whole lot easier to talk it out than it is to shoot it out. And a little rapprochement, and you can go a long way. Because one of the things that is very, very disturbing is what Albert Pike, the noted Satanist, said about the Third World War. So one, we got two, yeah, third one, that's coming. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantages of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and the political Zionism, the state of the Israel, mutually destroy each other. Sounds like they're getting two Mikeys to do it. The other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will form that moment, be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. Now these guys got a plan. I don't know if they got a button. They're going to get us to push our own buttons to kill each other. But I've said this for years, is that we have been taken advantage of by Luciferian forces to kill each other. So if the Muslim kills the Jew, and the Jew kills the Christian, and the Christian kills the Muslim, and everybody goes back and forth killing everybody from the three major religions, there's not a whole lot for them to clean up after. So they always get us to do the dirty work for them, because we get sucked into these emotional arguments to think that we're good and better and perfect, and they're not. They're, you know, the other common analogy is I always hear all the time, that the other side's the Antichrist. So if we look at what Christ stood for, especially when he said his last commandment to love one another, and we're picking up all kinds of weapons to kill each other, well then, we're the Antichrist. Because he didn't tell us to do that. He didn't say, hey, I'm leaving now, and I want you all to raise up armies and slaughter everybody and everything. He didn't say that. He said, I want you to, the last commandment, love one another. That's what he said. So if you don't do that, then what are you? You're the Antichrist. So how can you say someone else is the Antichrist when you're going there to slaughter them? So it appears we've all been taken advantage of by this. So this is why it is so fundamentally important for the Muslim, the Christian, the Jew, and it appears here even where it says that they're even going to kill the atheists. So the atheist thinks they're one up on the Christians. These Luciferians want you dead too, brother. So now I just told you how they're going to cheat you. It's right here in, you know, Albert Pike's Luciferian Handbook. How to get you all to worship Satan or kill you in the process. Why are we going down that trail, right? It's like giant sign, bridge out. The bridge is out. Don't go down that trail. We just sit at the side, cook up a little fish and chat. Talk about some of our diversities. You tell me a little bit about yours, and I'll tell you a little bit about mine, and we'll be friends. Let Lucifer go across the bridge on his own. Don't get sucker punched. So it's a funny thing. You know, you got all these people, they go to all these universities, have all these intelligence agencies spying on everybody. Well, Albert Pike wrote that in the clear. He says, I'm going to clean your clock, and this is how I'm going to do it. And you're going to do it. It's all published in the clear. And you fall for it. Stupid is as stupid does. So another reason, I guess, why they want to get after Iran too is huge oil field discovered in Iran. Giant suckers. National Iranian Oil Company announced the discovery of huge oil field with considerable crude in southern Iran. Bonus. There's a good reason to get after them. More Iranian oil entering the Mediterranean despite the sanctions. So that's the thing with these bullshit sanctions, they never work anyway. People always find alternatives. It's like these idiots who think these things up say, well, if I build a trap that will crush you this way, that you're just going to sit there and allow yourself to get trapped. No. People are going to think and look at it and go, hey, wait a minute. There's an option here. I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. The last thing they're going to do is sit there and get trapped. Unless they're really stupid. Maybe they are, maybe they ain't. So we see Comrade Obama, student of the Communist Manifesto, it appears, got his first kill, or at least the first kill after the NDAA, because they've been doing this since day one of civilization. First guy coming out of the cave probably was killing people. I like that picture. You know you're hitting on the right trail, where as soon as I find a picture that I like and I post it on a website, it disappears immediately. You know, like the next day it's gone. So I get the feeling the, you know, the Obama-ite CIS or whatever, we're right on that to say, hey, we're not allowing that picture to go out. I liked it. The other thing you like is you just look at it too. There's a lot of like 666 in there. You got 6 stars, and 6 stripes. 666 in there as they're clapping like seals. So yes, they passed the National Defense Authorization Act in 2012. The bedrock of American freedom allows indefinite detention. And then we got the nerve to talk about Russia. China just passed something like that today too. See, they can make you secretly disappear. You know, they're a communist country or something like that, or supposed to be. The Constitution is the Constitution. We don't rip it up, we don't tear it, and we don't spit on it like these people do all the time. So way back when in 1975, during the Church Committee hearings, that's in the Senate, was it the Church and Pike, Senate and Congress, looking into all the dirty tricks of the intelligence agencies, they found out that they had an assassination gun, a high, you know, profile dart gun of some sort or another that could shoot a frozen ice pellet with a chemical that induces a heart attack that would melt in your body and dissipate and not be found at autopsy, so that they could kill you. Originally the gun was developed to shoot guard dogs so that no one would ever know you snuck into their base, and they would recover and no one would ever know. But then, of course, you know, there's a lot of other people that know too much, so they got to be taken out. So that was one of the cute tricks they have to take them out. 50 of these weapons were made at Fort Detrick, Maryland. The effect was like being hit with a mosquito or something like that, if you even felt it at all. So there's allegations it was used against John F. Kennedy too, to paralyze him before his assassination, and that's why he put his hands up and looked like he was in a bizarre state. Some people are speculating he was shot with this. It was used in other types of weapons too, including umbrellas. So this is the joy, you know, we get out of this type of affair. And then we have this type of affair here. This is, you know, being in bed with the media. They're never going to tell the truth. They're never going to talk about what's really going on. We change our leaders, and it's like, you know, meet the old boss, same as the new boss. There's really no difference between them. They just carry on the programs of the New World Order. And then a guy comes along like this chap, Andrew Breitbart, and he makes the classic, what I guess we could call the Princess Diana mistake. Next month, I'm going to tell you the big secret about this, that, or the other thing. Gives them a month to plan and kill you. You never say jack shit until you say it. And then you just say it. Let the chips fall where they may. You don't announce you're going to say it. That's a death sentence. And that's what very well could have happened to this guy. Of course, the coroner's report will probably not even come close to including what really should be in there, because they don't even know about stuff like that. See if we get the video to play and we'll see him speak for himself.
Barack Obama. Well, I've got videos, by the way. This election, we're going to vet him. I've got videos. This election, we're going to vet him from his college days to show you why racial division and class warfare are central to what Hope and Change was sold in 2008. The videos are going to come out. The narrative is going to come out that Barack Obama met a bunch of silver ponytails back in the 1980s, like Bill and Bernadine Dorn, who, equally radical, said one day we're going to have the presidency, and the rest of us slept while they plotted and they plotted and they plotted, and they oversaw hundreds of millions of dollars in the Annenberg Challenge, and they had real money from real capitalists who gave it on to their children and their children's children, and then they become communists. We got to work on that. We got to work on that. That's a parenthesis. Barack Obama is a radical. We should not be afraid to say that. Okay? And Barack Obama was launched from Bill and Bernadine's salon. I've been there. It became a self-evident truth to me that there's zero chance that this incredible chef did not cook many a meal for Barack Obama. Don't tell me ABC, CBS, and NBC I don't have the that I can't posit that theory, because it's a self-evident truth. Just like it was a self-evident truth that he was with Jeremiah Wright, and just as it's a self-evident truth that when he was at Harvard, he was advocating for the worst of the worst to join the faculty. Radicals at Beirut on the Charles. And that is who's in the White House, and that's who's outside right now telling you you don't have a right to be here, and who would squelch your free speech just as easily they do at Harvard, Vassar, Yale, Wesleyan. They're a bunch of totalitarian freaks.
Yes, indeed, a bunch of totalitarian freaks. And you voted for him, you played the sucker job. When we look at some of the fine details, Obama was associated, maybe you don't know some of these names because they go back in time so far, but it was a terrorist group called the Weather Underground. So according to a former FBI agent, Larry Grathwohl, the organization run by Bill Ayers carried out bombings targeting the Pentagon, the State Department, police stations, and federal buildings. They were hoping to cause the government to collapse and open the door for Cuban, North Vietnamese, Chinese, and/or Russian troops to occupy the country and kick your ass. And that's what you got for president. Because he doesn't have any ID and you don't know where he came from. Think I'm going to get a job without any ID? I don't have a birth certificate. I got this one here with somebody else's name on it. Can I use that one? Ain't going to happen. Not anywhere close to being president of the United States. Breitbart actually had dinner with Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn last month, and he may have revealed some of his hand, like personal details that they could have collected to use to set him up for assassination. Loose lips sink ships, and he may have sunk his own ship. Some of the background material that came out of research on this is just, amazing. The EMF brain stimulation program for remote neural monitoring. They've been doing some awesome stuff at the Skunk Works for national security, let me tell you. And it goes back a long, long time. They know all the frequencies to control, the motor control cortex frequency, motor impulse coordination auditory cortex frequency, sound which bypasses the ear's visual cortex frequency, images in the brain bypassing the eyes, the somatosensory cortex frequency, the phantom touch sense thought center frequency. Like, man, is there anything you can do that they can't control? Then they get into Matt Simmons, the oil industry expert who was killed in a similar type of way. How MI6 agent Richard Tomlinson, former MI6 agent, discusses in the Milosevic trial a staged car accident where the driver would be blinded by a flash of light and a remote-controlled brake failure. Princess Grace of Monaco kind of went down that way too. They've taken out a lot of people. Then, of course, Sloby Milosevic, he says he's going to be poisoned while he's in jail, and he dies of poisoning. These people are just absolutely amazing. They killed Aaron Russo. There was one of the other ones here. This one I liked at the end. There's a company called In-Q-Tel, a CIA venture capital firm. They bought Recorded Future. They're in Dutch with Google. Google is in bed with the intelligence agencies. Ben Laurie, the advisory board member of WikiLeaks, is involved with them, the security boss at Google. Used to be a spook as well. It's just, you know, it's a never-ending web of trickery and deceit. And of course, one of the things they always talk about is, you know, their peace, and they always want peace. Well, the big thing about their kind of peace, too, is you always got to remember, when they want peace, prepare for war, because that's usually what they're looking for. Big time what they're looking for. And then we've got a little more on this story. You know, I've been sitting on it for a while about these Treasury bills that were confiscated in Italy, came in this trunk. Federal Reserve System, Chicago, Mother Box, the Treaty of Versailles. When you go to war, you fight over, you know, money, basically, lots of it, more than you could ever understand. King's ransoms worth. So it doesn't surprise me that there may have been secret ramifications to the Versailles Treaty. But a lot of things have been coming into the light. These individuals were supposed to be in possession of $6 trillion worth of fake billion-dollar notes. And then at the same time, you know, roughly we have this Lord James addressing the House of Lords in Britain, saying there's $15 trillion of off-the-books assets that have been pilfered, are being traded around the world, and he wants the British intelligence services to do an investigation. 2009, we had some Japanese men arrested with 134.5 billion in these so-called high-value fake notes trying to get into Switzerland in 2009. The funny thing about some of these notes is they were taken on deposit in 2007 at a bank in Zurich. So if there's such obvious forgeries, like a $1 billion note with Wilson on it, like, what bank is going to take them in? Nobody. And I mean nobody. So these little coupons on the bottom are interest-bearing coupons, payable on demand. This note is payable on demand too. $1 billion in gold, payable to the bearer on demand, as authorized by law. Of course, we got to change that law real fast. But this is a Treasury certificate. It's not a Fed certificate. They replaced them later with this version here, which is a Federal Reserve bond. $1 billion in gold with interest-bearing portions. So the Italian police confiscate this stuff, and Giuseppe looks really good here with all this fake material allegedly here on the bottom. Newspaper clippings and documentary stuff going back in history. Like, if you're just a plain old counterfeiter, I can't see why you need all that stuff, and I can't see how you get this box. But of course, where do they go? They go to the Federal Reserve and say, are these notes legit? And what does the Federal Reserve say? No, they're not. Made up. These guys made it up, they're counterfeit. Well, what if there really was this $15 trillion or other sovereign accounts like we've talked about on previous shows and we have previous postings on? These accounts with numbers that are just so large you can't even comprehend what they are. What if they do exist? And what if this is the documentary paper behind them? And what if the U.S. Treasury and then the U.S. Federal Reserve were keeping the real gold on deposit, with these pieces of paper being your certificate, just like the Knights Templar? So you trade the paper, they got the gold. And then one day, you got the paper, and they say the paper's worthless. Well, when they say the paper's worthless, what does that say? It says there's no gold. There never was. But if there was, and you stole it and it disappeared, by them having the gall to come to the master thief to say, is this a legitimate piece of paper? And you say no, means you walk off with the gold. So if this guy's got $6 trillion worth of paper that's supposed to be gold, bonus. But it's the same thing with the Knights Templar. They printed way more paper than there was gold because they know no one would ever come for all the gold at one time. So that could be one of the scenarios where they've printed way more paper than there is gold. Or maybe with these sovereign accounts, there is that much gold. Lord James says he trusted National Geographic to use as his source to say there was only 700 tons of gold mined in human history. Well, that may be true, may not be true. Some people allege that the Vatican has more than that in their own personal supply. But people do fight over this. So there was a mysterious death of this banker, Philip Townsend, killed in Estonia. Said he died of carbon monoxide poisoning in this remote cabin that he built for himself. He was an opulent manor in Britain, I assure you. And right from the moment I heard of his death, something just seemed really strange. Like, you don't put a generator on the inside of your house, right? It makes fumes. It's like, like I don't have the engine for my car inside the passenger compartment. I sit in there. It's got to be outside and separate and distinct so we don't die of carbon monoxide poisoning. It only makes sense. It's child's play. So as soon as I heard he died of carbon monoxide poisoning, right away I'm very suspicious, because it's not probably a clean, beautifully fuel-efficient type of engine. Some of these generators, generate byproducts like, smoky, oily exhaust that you're going to smell in a heartbeat. So they also talked that it was leaking gasoline. Well, if it was leaking gasoline indoors, you're going to smell that easily. And then I find more details to find out that Mr. Townsend's body was found near the generator. So that means he knew something was wrong and he was going to the generator. Because he could either smell the gas, or maybe he heard the person who was tampering with the generator. Perhaps him and his wife were rendered unconscious first, and the generator was tampered with second to make it look like it was an accidental death. The best of the best when you're an assassin. The books are closed. What makes me even more suspicious is he worked for a Russian capital company that no one's ever heard of before, called Enza Capital. And Enza Capital has a AAA credit rating. Countries don't have AAA credit ratings anymore. Major banks don't have AAA credit ratings anymore. How does this little company that nobody's heard of have a AAA credit rating? Because maybe, as in one of the background articles that we had, Vladimir Putin is awaiting a 3% payment on Russian taxes of the $7.2 trillion portion of some funds called the Wanta funds that were used to destroy Russia. So obviously he's sitting and waiting to get portions of these sovereign accounts himself, possibly through a front company called Enza that no one's ever heard about, to move the money from one shore to another shore, into Zurich, out of Zurich. But the whole concept of this is, by saying that these notes are counterfeit, they're alleging and proving the tomb is empty, but at the same time, they're prepared to receive the contents of the tomb. Can't have it both ways. This man probably knew too much and he was taken out for one reason or another. I don't believe his death was an accident for a minute. And that's what we do. I like this little picture. We shine the light. Don't go into the attic, because we're shining the light up there about the truth. So that old trunk in the attic, we're going to figure out what was in it and how it works. Did a little background check on our Baron James of Blackheath, David Noel James, born in 1937, December 7th, a day of infamy. Corporate troubleshooter. So he's done a lot of stuff, propping up companies, helping companies, getting things going. He was the guy, if you remember back to the Iran-Iraq War, through a company called Eagle Trust, that visited a factory that made that big-ass cannon that Saddam Hussein was going to shoot Iraq with, or Iran with. And he gave the information to MI6. So he's right in there with the intelligence agencies right at the very beginning. He was involved as the chairman of the Millennium Dome Project. He ran for election in 2005, didn't make it. He conducted reviews for the Conservative Party about how to save £35 billion in state sector savings. He's vocal about concerns about the financial management of the London 2012 Olympics. He's nominated for peerage in 2006. He's also involved in the cash for peerages scandal, so he bought his lordship for a lot less than $15 trillion. But he is Baron James of Blackheath. In November 2010, and we posted this video on the website too, he did make another bizarre speech to the House of Lords talking about this secret foundation, Foundation X, probably the foundation that controls the sovereign accounts that we have posted on the website, approaching England and offering to lend them billions of pounds interest-free. Of course, they probably turned it down. Maybe they'll come back and offer it to Greece and we can all get out of the cellar. He's also a consultant for a company called Cerberus Management. And if you remember what we did on Anders Breivik way back, we followed his little map to Wiens, Austria. There was a charity group there called BAWAG Foundation, B-A-W-A-G, owned by Cerberus Capital Management. And a little coffee shop or place next door was running a little play, Rambo, Rambo, Rambo. They did a concert. And And Cerberus is the three-headed dog of Hades, and he was Rambo, Rambo, Rambo. Hercules captured Cerberus alone without weapons. The police captured Breivik alone without weapons. Bush appointed his Treasury Secretary, John Snow, to be chairman of Cerberus on October 19, 2006. So, again, this vast currency reserves backed by gold bullion of Foundation X, of possibly this $15 trillion thing. It's approximate that the debt of the United States is equivalent to this magic $15 trillion that may or may not exist. I find that rather cute. Then I have to wonder, because the world is run by lies, there's a prime tenet in the conspiracy genre about how cash is created. The money is created out of thin air. And there's nothing backing the Federal Reserve. What if we're wrong? What if the Federal Reserve was actually printing that money based on the gold that was in the sovereign accounts, that was held on deposit, that no one knows about? Because you have to wonder sometimes when you go to your politician and you speak to them earnestly and honestly and you say, we're creating money out of thin air and we have to change the system and go back to a treasury to create the money, debt-free and interest-free. And they listen to you. They give you a pat on the head like a little kid who said something stupid in front of his mom and dad and send you on your way to your room, sometimes without ice cream. What if they know all along that those sovereign accounts may be behind the currency and they're just not telling us? And the ultimate robbery ever in the human race would be for a small cabal of people to steal all that wealth, especially as we're going into an economic crisis, and we'll probably get into that a little more. But there's a big lawsuit going on about the Vatican Bank ends of things. Alperin versus the Vatican Bank. So a guy named Emerson Bigelow, who was director of monetary research for the U.S. Treasury in 1946, wrote a memo, and that's the big piece of evidence that goes into this court case against the Vatican. The witness being former OSS agent William Gowen, that a large sum of gold was transported from Switzerland to the Pontifical College in 1946. The memo was written on October 16, 1946. It even names the individual who took the gold, 10 truckloads, Colonel Ivan Babich of Yugo fame, and all the ethnic conflicts that go on there that Clinton had to get his hands in there for. I wonder if they had a little more, and that's some of the reasons why we had to go in there and fight, is you got to follow the gold. Doesn't surprise me in the slightest. It just happens all the time. But there's just so much they never tell us. One of the other funny things about this story is Benjamin Fulford said that Lord James died. And Lord James quoted Samuel Clemens, "Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated." So we have to wonder about Fulford, if you're going to put up a bullshit story like that, why you'd bother. Because it just doesn't make any sense. You're going to get caught. It's not like, they're not going to miss a guy in the House of Lords and he's just going to fall off the face of the earth. And if they did, well, somebody'd probably hear about it one way or another. Another piece of this puzzle that's most disturbing for the economy is inadvertently, when I open up my emails and I go to the BS page of MSN, I guess it was, they had an article about the hyperbolic debt and hyperbolic gold. That the curves have gone past exponential into a whole new phase. And this can be very, very disturbing, because we live in an illusion about our money and our wealth. So what happens with the parabola, or hyperbolic curve, is I found this cone feature, just because it illustrates the point, is like we're in this economy here at the bottom. If it shrinks down to zero where cash is worthless, the hyperbola exists like on two different sides at the same time, usually as a graph that looks like an exponential graph, one on each side of the axes of the graph. The gold would be shooting out on this side, increasing potentially to infinity with time. The downside of this is the individual who wrote these articles said that you won't notice when it happens. Because by the time you do notice, it'll be too late. So if we're standing here as an observer, by the time we see it choke off to that point, it's already too late. Basically, where we're punished is, we have these stupid leaders who just kowtow everything. So I just use an analogy like they're the town crier just going around, all is well, all is well, all is well. Even though they know full well, like we're up to our necks in water and this happened, they won't tell you. And our politicians won't tell us either. Like Stephen Harper goes to the World Economic Forum, comes back, say we have to do things about pensions, doesn't tell us what the real state of affairs are with the books. He just says, well, we have to make changes down the road sometime. I think we had to make changes down the road 10, 15 years ago. It's probably too late now. We've gone past the point. So even when we have the honorable lookout going, iceberg dead ahead, sir, it's not good enough. So we can't change the course of the ship in time by the time he says something like that. So where it is fundamental for you is to prepare yourselves to have that lifeboat. Because when the cash goes to zero, I found these old pictures from Germany in 1923 when paper money was worthless, and this woman's burning it in her fireplace to keep warm, and these kids are in the street playing with it because it's just paper. And they probably had the same thing happen. There's probably some gold backing that up, you see? You see, Germany lost the war, right? And after the war was over, they had this thing called the Versailles Treaty. And Germany had to pay reparations for the war. We can round that off probably to say they didn't get to keep the gold. Maybe they had to put some stuff on deposit at the Treasury in the United States. And there was this big box that said, Treaty of Versailles, with all these billion-dollar notes backed up and payable in gold that were worth something because they were backed up and payable in gold. And the old notes they had, the Wehrmacht banknotes, were worthless then because there was no gold backing them up anymore. Just a thought. And then maybe in time, this will be the fate of the American banknotes, the Federal Reserve notes. But they'll be worthless and hauled away. Actually, it's probably better to burn them and use them for whatever you can use them for if you have to. But this article says, it's linked to my blog there, gold set for hyperbolic increase. There's 5 big reasons for this. One is that the United States collects only 55 cents in taxes on every dollar spent. Well, that, I think even an idiot can figure out can't go on for too long. The United States debt trap is concealed by the exceptionally low interest rate. The bank's balance sheets are considerably weaker than stated. Keynesian economists, terrified of the bank contraction, strongly promotes the expansion of the narrow money to buy off a deflationary depression. I think we're better off with deflationary depression compared to hyperinflation. The purchasing power of dollar bills has fallen past monetary expansion, yet more dollars have to be issued to cover increased government costs. Past inflation becomes a compounding factor behind the prices. So there'll be a point in time when we get past the point of no return. And that could be just a little bit scary. That ride's going to be coming along very quickly. See if I can find a graph for that here. Okay. Just bear with me. I may have stuck this one in the wrong spot. There we go. So this is a graph of the true money supply. This was the link in the article about that. Money supply explosion will lead to accelerating inflation. So they're looking at this graph representing this expansion of the money supply. Not really getting super hot, guaranteed to get super hot by 2014, late 2013. And this is the graph of the gold price following the same trail. And then, of course, when that line starts going straight up, you realize, of course, that's when it starts going into infinity. So gold prices theoretically could go to infinity in roughly February 2014, given that all these other factors stay in place. And then the joke of the day was on mainstream radio when I heard that they have a new way to do quantitative easing without inflation. They didn't say what it was. I looked on the internet to see if I could find, what the big plan was. And when I sent it out to the faithful, this little article, I just added the first few words to the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, because that's what it's going to take to increase the money supply like that without inflation. But there is a formula for that. It's called the quantity theory of money. The money supply times the velocity of the money, it doesn't mean how fast you throw it exactly, but how fast it goes through the system, equals the price times the economic activity or transactions T. So MV equals PT. V and T are supposed to be fixed and stable, but I wouldn't hold on to that too closely in this day and age. The growth in the money supply directly leads to an increase in prices, inflation. So what they're playing with is fire, but they're hoping the velocity of money will plunge as the economy slumps, and that way they can increase the money supply. So if the government fails to ramp up the money supply, M, the prices will dive, and then you get this so-called depression. But you have to know exactly how much to do it by, and they can't, because there's a lot of things they can't take into account. One of the other things that's very complicated about this is the quantity theory of money, not the quantity law of money. So there could be other variables that come into play that knock your teeth out, and that's why we've had all these problems. The Zimbabwe syndrome, for lack of a better word, that could be on our plate as early as into 2013. Because basically what they've got is like a nuclear chain reaction of economy going on, and they're playing with all the dials, and we know what they're like. The Brits are raising mortgage rates at their banks, so even though the bank rate is fixed, they've come up with something else, and I can imagine other banks will do it too. It's called the LIBOR, L-I-B-O-R. This is interbank lending. So the rates are going up in the interbank lending, which banks have eaten before. And now they're not going to do that anymore. They're going to increase rates to us poor guys at the bottom, the customers. Some of the net effects of some of the things are something I've complained about and worried about, speculated for years, would be the privatization of almost everything, including the police. So we see this article here, police could call in outside firms to investigate crimes in a dramatic step towards privatization. Home Secretary Theresa May announced police funding is set to be cut by 20% by 2015. West Midlands and Surrey police have put out a contract, almost sounds like the mafia, with Group 4 security to take over a lot of their functions. Of course, they promised that, some of the mainline functions will still be run by the usual police, but a lot of other things are just going to go down the happy trail. And I've said this for years, that this is going to come. The people who protect these globalists, hand and foot, thanks for the comment out there if you heard it, are ultimately cutting their own throats. So here we see what happens when the angry mob catches up to Nicolas Sarkozy, and that could be happening to a lot of politicians near you. And the cops that are privatized may or may not look after them, because maybe it's the cops who used to not be privatized that were public servants might be chasing them down the street. Want to give them a good thrashing. I know some Greek police were occupying a government building in Greece. So this could be the future for some of our politicians, where angry mobs are chasing them down the street, and we may have to or may not have to depend on whatever police we can afford to pay to look after them. Isn't that a shame? We'd hate to see that happen. So you look at some of the things they're doing, it just boggles your mind. Western Australia, draft mental health bill to electroshock children. Proposal for child sterilization. allowing 12-year-olds to consent for psychosurgery and electroshock and more atrocities. This is supposed to be something that's, done in a civilized country. We must remember, we showed Obama visiting the Prime Minister of Australia. She's a hardcore commie going way back too. That's who does stuff like that. Totalitarians. It's in their handbook. Albert Pike's book is worse, but theirs isn't too far behind. Good comic about the debt ceiling somebody got me is, A, Democrats don't understand the debt ceiling. B, Republicans don't understand the debt ceiling. C, liberals don't understand the debt ceiling. Neocons don't understand the debt ceiling. Allow me to explain. Let's say you come home from work and there's been a sewer backup in your neighborhood. Your home has sewage in it all the way up to the ceiling. What do you think you should do? Raise the ceilings or pump out the crap? That's a hard one. Iceland wants to adopt the Canadian dollar. After all their beatings, you're coming to the good country, the other snow country, to say, hey, let's do sharesies. That's probably a good move on their part. Maybe we could inherit something from them, like some chutzpah, to say no to the criminal bankster empire. We had a big train crash in Poland. 2 trains got on the same track, collided head-on at a significant speed. Serious loss of life. And then right away, too, because I always sit in the background and watch the news, I was really wondering, how come they never announced any of the victims or talked about anything? It's just pictures of mangled train cars, national days of mourning, all the victims being mourned, yada yada, bigger story, no names, no names. Well, in Poland they have a privacy law, and that's one of the big reasons, but you figure outside of Poland somebody's going to publish the names. Nobody was publishing any of the names. Really gets to be strange. I had to really look long and hard to find some, and I did. One of the other things that's just very surprising for people in the numerology are the coordinates of where the crash happened. And I'll do my best. Sici Konichi in Poland, 50 degrees, 37 minutes, 21 seconds north, 19 degrees, 51 minutes, 22 seconds east. So you play a little bit of arithmetic with those numbers, 50, 37, 21, and you play the numerology game, it comes down to 9. Then when you take the 19, 51, 22 and you play the numerology game, it comes down to 11. Not that that means anything, but it's amazing how that happens. Of course, one of the trains was a TLK 3100 or 311. And then the other locomotive, the ET-22 1105. So you have a 511 backwards. They always like to have those magic power numbers and some of the things that are done by the Illuminati. They're very good at that, and this is no different. One of the other bizarre factors in the crash, after I got the list of names, was one of the names is exactly the same as an artist who drew this picture. Sparks and Fuel. Just one of those strange anomalies, I guess. But the big deal is 2 of the men killed in the crash, Krzysztof Maslowski, Marcin Bernazik, were engineers for one of the biggest companies that build up after we blow up, called AECOM. So they were doing work in Syria before. They do work all over the world, really. There's 45,000 employees. Clinton and Bush are on the board of directors at the top end. We really got to wonder, did this have something to do with the train crash, that they were taking somebody out? And it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. It was a big scandal in Houston, too. They run the port in Houston. And the port directors got an all-expense-paid trip to go to the desert in the Sahara for some strange reason. What the port in, I guess they want to show you what it's going to look like in 10,000 years after a pole shift or something like that. These people are paid $359,000 a year. Port President Alec Dreyer, his legal bills for standing up to all this crap are $23 million over the last 2 years. You got to pay for all that stuff. But he gets his free Saharan vacation as if he needs the money. They had a lot of business interests this company anyway, in Libya. That makes things deeply disturbing because, you know, who knows what else they're up to. So they're supposed to have a highway contract in Poland that this company's gotten. Do they do any work for the new radar installations that are going on to spy on the Soviet Union? But this is one of the faces of one of the young men killed. And like I say, we had a long, hard time to find it. This is the other guy. They black out his face. But he was the engineer, the consultant in this. Another woman, this one here, Lena. She was a human rights defender. Well, we know there's a lot of human rights defenders don't have a great lifespan in Russia, so we're not surprised about that, are we? No, we're not. And I guess what we should do is I had a video here about Russia and the tough stuff.
Vladimir Putin is preaching safety first for Russia, saying its armed forces should be battle-ready to face any threat. That's the latest pre-election message from the Prime Minister as he prepares to take part in the presidential election in just under 2 weeks' time. Our correspondent Sarah Firth has the details.
This is the latest article. It's number 6 in a series that have been written by the Prime Minister that have been published on Mondays in the main newspapers in the country. Now, the previous articles have focused on a wide range of subjects from the economy to democracy, and this latest article focusing on national security and talks about the upgrade of the armed services. Now, the priorities that it lays out are around nuclear weapons, air missile defense, intelligence, and an upgrade as well of the Navy, the Air Force and the Army. Now, this total overhaul's set to cost hundreds of billions of dollars, and we know there has been some concerns from some Russian lawmakers over the amount of money that it will take to modernize the armed services, but the Prime Minister stressing in the article that it's not a time to appear weak. The article mentions that this is in some ways a response to the rise of local and regional conflicts, some of which it says has been orchestrated on Russia's borders. It also touches on the perceived threat of the NATO missile defense shield in Europe. Now, some of this modernisation has actually already gotten underway. Some of the bolstering of the missiles. We know that Russia's deployed the newly developed ballistic missile, the Boulevard. That's designed to carry nuclear warheads. And Russia says that that can break through any missile defense shield. Now, Russia's also recently sealed a deal to buy the Mistral, these helicopter-carrying warships, and it sealed that deal with France. So certainly some of this bolstering of the modernisation of the armed forces underway. As we said, Prime Minister outlining in his article the necessity of this at this time in the country.
We will, under no conditions, give up our strategic deterrent capability. On the contrary, we will strengthen it. Russia cannot rely on diplomatic and economic methods alone to remove contradictions and resolve conflicts. Our armed forces, special services, and other security agencies should be prepared to provide quick and effective responses to new challenges.
You can get the full text of that translated article on our website, rt.com. And keeping on topic, the Prime Minister is today visiting the country's Far East, where he's attending a meeting to discuss the development of a military-industrial complex that will take place over the course of the next 10 years.
Okay, there we have it. They're going to have a military-industrial complex, as if that seems to be the only way to rule the world. Doing a fine job there, Vladimir. But unfortunately, I don't agree with the military-industrial complex. It hasn't done us any good. It's all it means is its death. It's falling into Albert Pike's trap. If we're dumb enough to do that, is that part of the 2012 prophecy that, you know, we wait till the election's over in November and we start our war for December and blow each other up for the end of December so the Mayans can go down in history? Prince Harry has traveled to Central America, Belize, looking at some of the ruins and relics. This is a picture of you know, some of the newer chambers found under, well, actually they found a long time ago. They're being explored now, deep underground Mexico City. And you know, you just see these you know, phenomenal ruins of this lost civilization that wrote the book on what might be our fate as we move from one phase to another phase. But, these things are coming up. This is a Daily Mail article. If you just Google some of these things, at least you can see and understand some of these things. I know I saw once on a TV documentary what was under there, and I never found it anywhere in print or in photograph on the internet. And it was just like underneath this giant pyramid was this like just amazing pool of water. It's just unbelievable what you saw there. So I can see why Prince Harry goes there. If there's ulterior motives, well, that could very well be true as well. Who knows? But it's just a devastatingly beautiful piece of archaeology. One piece of devastatingly, well, not necessarily beautiful, but piece of real estate. Osama bin Laden's lair has been demolished, as if we're surprised. Like, who was it that broke the story on that? Well, yeah, I guess it was me. We see all these pictures in the bullshit media, and we see a name on a wall in another language, and we decide, well, I wonder what that says. And it says it's a girls' school with a phone number, and we know right from the very beginning that this was all a fake makeup set with the little fake helicopter that crashed. They have to destroy the place. It's evidence. It's just absolutely amazing. The locals even say that the guy that they say was Osama bin Laden was ridiculed by locals, one identifying the man in a video saying it was his neighbor named Akbar Khan. Well, maybe poor old Akbar got a few extra holes drilled in him. But, we found the witness who saw all this go down. We posted it up here. We did a very big show on the Power Hour about that. We broke it. Everybody else falls for the crap. We find a way to peel it back and show you what really happened. Of course, after that, some Navy SEALs were killed in Afghanistan. Maybe they had something to do with the film in real life, and were taken out of business. Martyrdom. That's what happens when you work for the New World Order. A British general has accused his military of 150 airstrikes by unmanned drones that just aren't talked about, covered up, because they kill a lot of civilians, and that's what makes people hate them, right? Like, you blow up your neighborhood, kill the school, all the kids going to school, they're not going to love you anymore. How many weddings have they blown up? That's winning the hearts and minds. So without understanding the consequences of these attacks, that they can have further problems. There's security implications, and that's why they don't release the facts of these attacks. Well, the big security implication is you screwed up. That's what happened. And then you're suffering through the law of unintended consequences, where all the people that got blown up, family, hate you. And they're going to come and get you. Monsanto has been given special new GMO seed approval by the United States government, the USDA, so they can poison you faster. There was a big fire at a Mississauga warehouse that was owned by Canada Border Services. That's our customs people. Massive fire. I mean, just all that's left is a wall. Guy was supposed to be recharging his battery or something like that. Whoa, I don't know what they had in there or how or why, man, but I'm telling you, that was a cookout, let me tell you. So is that part of the oncoming war, that something was taken out one way or another? Agenda 21 is cropping up in California. These crooked SOBs have come up with a new way to get around the sheriff. So while they come in to enforce various federal statutes based on treaty law with this Agenda 21, what they're doing is finding a county representative who's a little more malleable to shredding the U.S. Constitution and not going to the sheriff at all, or even mentioning him in documents, or her. And that's something you Americans better get on top of. It's the sheriff or nothing. You don't let the feds or anybody else come into your backyard and kick you around, period. A neat invention came up. The speech jamming gun stops people from talking by freezing the brain. Japanese scientists can do almost anything. And I'm sure the New World Order is going to want to point one of those through the window around here very, very soon. There's a big free speech march in Krakow, Poland, because a lot of people are complaining that they just don't have freedom of thought and TV down there. We have so many things coming along on our plate. It's just absolutely amazing. Then somebody told me a good one today. Why don't government workers look out the window in the morning? Because then they'd have nothing to do in the afternoon. That's terrible. But that's what we pay them for. And then this little video, we don't have time to show it. Must-see video. Weather Modification Incorporated, a real company spraying us right now. I mentioned this on the old Gary Bell show. Well, actually, it's still the Gary Bell show. I'm just older and not on it anymore. But when this was a conspiracy theory, I'd be coming up with websites and stuff like that from companies who actually do it. This one's in America. Weather Modification Incorporated. There was also one I found in New Zealand. And then the Russians do it as well with their military technology. So they seed clouds all the time for all kinds of sporting events and such. Happens all the time. There's nothing new about this. It's just when they use it as a weapon, then it's really dangerous. And then I guess we'll close up by playing this thing. This is just amazing. Epitaph, the late, great United States. If we get the war with Israel, if we can have our way and follow Albert Pike's plan, to turn us all into Lucifer-worshipping whatevers, to kill all the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, and the atheists. It tells us we better team up.
It's over. The sacrifice is done. A lone bugle plays weak warble taps as the smoke drifts from the ruins into the dark grey sky. America and the world is finished. The plan is executed. Shuffle of straggling survivors is heard as the rubble continues to slowly crumble. The jagged silhouette of a once proud metropolis looms in the background like the set of an old war movie. Only this is no movie. One thing led to another, and then it was over. Only now could the warnings be heard in the survivors' ears. Awake. If so, too late. An eerie gasp of collective horror fills human consciousness as the news reaches distant shores, arriving like limp waves lapping in the misty silence. Lonely, drenched survivors dragging themselves up the beach. Wailing and supplication erupt from humanity and saturate the heavens. It was not just America. Israel, the trigger used to start the conflagration, is immolated. Only this phoenix will never rise again. Iran is pocked with craters between vast, flattened landscapes. Russia and China survived but badly wounded. The UK and other NATO countries in Europe also took major hits, as did Syria, Lebanon, India and Pakistan for entering the fray. Almost all US and NATO bases are gone or inoperable. Not bad in itself, but they brought devastation to scores of their host countries. The human toll is inestimable. Recovery is not an option. Now, it's survival. I ask you, is this what you want? Because this is where we're headed unless humanity has one hell of a massive wake-up. Is there still time to avert this? I don't know. We know they're cocked and loaded and itching to get this thing started. How far it will go remains to be seen. I do know we'll get past this one way or form or another. Until then, prepare and keep sounding the alarm. The wake-up is in full swing, and that's why the crackdown. They're afraid of us, and rightly so. Expect empowerment and synchronicity to guide you, and learn to follow your heart. As you act on it, the volume grows louder. And keep your fire burning brightly.
Yes, keep the fire burning brightly. I like that one. That one just is just so amazing. I'll have to post it on the website so you can just watch it in just a little short. But is that what you want? Do you want a war like that? Or do you want to hold these warmongers down and say no, no, no. That's what we say here at Conspiracy Cafe, at that channel. We say no, we don't want that. No one deserves that. That's Lucifer's plan. If Christ said anything that we should take heed of was to love one another. That's the key. You can't get sucked into this plan to do the killing if you love one another. It's a hard act to perform sometimes, especially if you've been hurt. But it's the only way to stop what you just saw from happening. If you want to live in a world like that, stay with the status quo. If you want to change the paradigm, if you want to make that impossible, change the channel. Change to that channel. Change to Conspiracy Cafe. Because we'll set it right. And we'll be back again, same that time, same that channel, next week. No war for us, baby. Mr. Pike, we know your plan. It isn't going to work. Good night.
About the crime, no one looks behind the curtain, and no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. 10 trials whose outcomes all fixed from the start. 9 judges sitting counting their money in the dark. 8 towers of iron surround the desert town. On a cold December morning, 7 martyrs knock them down. 6 fathers still waiting for their 6 sons to come home. 5 mothers who know better and accept that they're gone. 4 years I've been hunted, still I breathe free. 3 times I shot the sheriff and did not spare the deputy. 2 prayers I'm praying until we're together. 1 promise I'm keeping, tonight and forever. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now